On a freezing winter morning, my daughter called me, her voice cold and distant. "Plans have changed. You're not coming to Switzerland anymore, Dad. My husband's family only wants people with the right background to come along. You look too unrefined, and they're afraid you'll embarrass my family at the resort." I didn't get angry. I just quietly hung up, containing the rage inside. The very next day, I secretly cut off all asset access, sold our family home lock, stock, and barrel, and left the city unnoticed. When they excitedly returned the house, "I'm incredibly grateful to have you here. Drop a comment below, letting me know which city or country you are watching from today. Also, please note this story includes certain fictional elements for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to specific names or settings is coincidental, but the core lesson remains deeply valuable. The kitchen was the coldest room in the house at that hour. Not because of the temperature, the old radiator along the far wall was doing its job just fine, ticking and hissing the way it always did on December mornings in Boston. The cold I'm talking about was something else entirely. It was the kind of cold that settles into a room when only one person sits at a table built for two. When the chair across from you has been empty for 3 years, and every single morning you still reach for 2 mugs out of habit before catching yourself. I set one mug back in the cabinet. I carried the other to the table. I sat down. Outside the kitchen window, the sky over the south end was the color of a bruise, that heavy pre-dawn purple that Boston wears in December like an old coat it can't bring itself to throw away. A thin sheet of snow covered the small backyard, smooth and untouched. Eleanor would have loved that. She always said fresh snow was God's way of giving the world a clean slate. I wrapped both hands around the mug and stared at her chair. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days since I'd watched her take her last breath in the upstairs bedroom of this house. 3 years of mornings exactly like this one, the radiator ticking, the sky bruised purple, the chair empty. I was not a man who spoke easily about grief, not even to myself. I'd spent 40 years on construction sites across Greater Boston, and the culture of those places did not reward men who talked about their feelings over their lunch pails. You worked. You built. You moved forward. That was the deal. But some mornings the chair just about broke me. I took a long sip of coffee and let the quiet settle around me. I had earned this quiet, I told myself. 70 years old, 40 of them building a concrete and steel contracting business from a single second-hand truck and a crew of 3. Robert Vance Construction had eventually poured the foundations for 11 commercial buildings across Boston, 2 highway overpasses in Massachusetts, and a bridge in western Connecticut that still carried 40,000 cars a day. I had worked until my lower back refused to cooperate, until my hands looked like topographic maps of some hard-lived territory, until Eleanor finally sat me down at this very table and said, "Robert, if you don't stop, I'll have to bury you before you retire, and I am not doing that paperwork." We'd laughed. Lord, we had laughed. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago, I'd done the paperwork instead. The trip to Switzerland was supposed to be about her. That was the whole point. Eleanor Margaret Vance had spent the better part of our marriage flipping through travel magazines, folding down the corners of pages that showed the Swiss Alps in winter. The snow-capped peaks, the little wooden chalets with smoke curling from their chimneys, the impossibly blue mountain lakes. Every time I'd looked at one of those magazines on the coffee table, I'd said, "Next year, Elle. We'll go next year." And next year always had a deadline to meet, a contract to finalize, a crew to manage. Now it was too late for next year. So 3 months ago, I had sat at this same kitchen table with my laptop and my reading glasses, and I had booked the Royal Alps Resort in St. Moritz, Switzerland. The master chalet suite, the finest room the property offered, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Engadine Valley, a private terrace, and a butler who would bring you hot cocoa at 10 in the evening if you asked. $60,000 for the full package flights. Accommodations, guided excursions, private dining. I had put every cent on my platinum card without blinking. I'd booked it for myself, for Chloe, and for her husband Julian. A family trip. A tribute. I was going to stand at the top of those mountains and tell Eleanor I'd finally made it. My phone rang at 6 o'clock exactly. The sound cut through the kitchen, quiet like a blade. The screen lit up on the table in front of me, and I saw my daughter's name, Chloe, and something in my chest tightened before I even picked up. Not premonition exactly, more like the way an old building creaks before a storm. You don't know what's coming, but your bones do. "Morning, sweetheart," I said. There was no warmth in return. No good morning, no how are you sleeping, Dad, no nothing. Just her voice, clipped and precise the way it had been getting these past 2 years, ever since she'd married Julian Sterling and started spending more time at his parents' estate in Wellesley than she ever did here. Dad. Just that. My name. Or rather, not even my name, just the title delivered like a business address. "Chloe, you're calling early. Everything all right? I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without making it into a whole thing," she said. I heard her moving in the background, heels on hardwood, the particular sharp sound of someone pacing with purpose. "About the Switzerland trip." I set my coffee mug down on the table. "All right, I'm listening." "You're not coming." 2 words. She delivered them the way you'd read a weather report. "Partly cloudy, 60% chance of rain. And by the way, your entire plan for honoring your dead wife has been canceled." My hand resting flat on the table did not move. My breathing did not change. 40 years of managing construction sites had taught me that the first 10 seconds after bad news are the most dangerous. That's when men say things they cannot take back, when they flip tables or throw phones or make decisions that cost them everything. I had learned to treat those 10 seconds like a controlled demolition. "You contain the blast. I'm going to need a little more than that," I said. My voice came out even, measured. "Arthur feels," she began, and right there, right at that name, something cold moved through me. "Arthur, her father-in-law. Uncomfortable dynamic," I repeated. "You know how he is, Dad. He's very particular about appearances. The resort is a certain kind of place. The guests are a certain kind of people. And you—" She paused, and in that pause lived something I felt in my sternum. "You've spent your whole career in work boots and hard hats. Arthur says you'd be out of your element, that it would be embarrassing. For everyone." The bruised sky outside had begun to lighten just barely at its eastern edge. I looked at it. I thought about Eleanor folding down the corner of a magazine page. I thought about the $60,000 I had put on my card without a second's hesitation. "Chloe," my voice dropped half a register. "That is a trip I planned and paid for in full. Every dollar of it. I know that, Dad." And here was the thing that stunned me. She did not sound apologetic. She did not sound conflicted or ashamed or even particularly uncomfortable. She sounded like a woman reading from a prepared statement. "And we appreciate it, we really do. But Arthur's parents are coming now too, and the chalet has a specific atmosphere, and honestly," another pause, and this one was worse than the first. "People like you don't really belong in places like that, Dad. You never did. It'll be better for everyone if you just stay home. People like you." I sat very still. The radiator ticked. The snow outside stayed smooth and untouched. People like you. 35 years ago, I had poured the concrete foundation for the building where Arthur Sterling had his first faculty office. I had built the infrastructure of this entire city with my hands and my back and my crew in the rain and the cold and the August heat that turned a construction site into something close to a furnace. I had funded Chloe's education, her wedding, her home, her life. Every comfort she had ever known had come from those hands that Arthur Sterling found so distasteful. And she had used his words, not even her own. She had borrowed his contempt and delivered it to me at 6 in the morning like it was nothing. "I see," I said. "Dad, don't be dramatic about it." "I'm not being dramatic." I picked up my coffee mug, stood up from the table, and carried it to the kitchen counter. My movements were slow and deliberate, the way I moved on a job site when I was assessing damage. "Thank you for letting me know, Chloe. You have a safe trip." "Dad, I mean it. Have a wonderful time." I ended the call before she could say another word. I set the phone face down on the granite counter. Then I stood there for a moment, both hands flat on the cold stone surface, looking at the empty chair across the kitchen. The tightness in my chest was enormous. It pressed against my ribs from the inside like something trying to get out. But I breathed through it, one slow breath, then another, the way I had breathed through 40 years of setbacks and failures and betrayals on job sites from here to Hartford. Eleanor's chair looked back at me and said nothing. "People like me," I said quietly to the empty room. "Huh." I stood straight. I walked down the hall to my study. I opened my laptop and waited for the screen to come to life, its pale blue glow filling the dark room, as the Boston sky outside began its slow, grudging climb toward dawn. I didn't know yet what I was going to find on that screen. But something in the marrow of my bones, something built from 4 decades of reading structural blueprints, and knowing before the engineers confirmed it, exactly where the rot had started, told me that the phone call had not been the whole story. It had only been the beginning of it. The drive to Chestnut Hill took 19 minutes. I did not rehearse what I would say. In 40 years of construction, I had learned that the men who walked into difficult conversations with scripts were always the ones who fell apart when the conversation went somewhere the script hadn't anticipated. You go in with your eyes open and your mouth closed until you understand what you're actually looking at. Then you speak. Chloe's house sat at the end of a curved driveway. A colonial I had helped her and Julian select 3 years ago had walked through twice before they made an offer, had pointed out the foundation crack in the northeast corner that the inspector had missed. They'd gotten $12,000 off the asking price because of that crack. Julian had shaken my hand afterward with the enthusiasm of a man accepting a gift he hadn't earned. I pulled to the curb rather than the driveway. Force of habit, you never block a sight until you know what's coming in and out. I sat for a moment and looked at the house. Julian's BMW was in the driveway. A second car I didn't recognize, a dark rental sedan, was parked directly behind it, blocking it in. The kitchen lights were on. The rest of the house was dark. I got out and walked to the garage. Typed the code into the panel the way I had typed it 100 times in the 3 years since they'd moved in, helping with a delivery, dropping something off the ordinary reasons a father appears at a daughter's house. The door rose. The garage was empty except for Chloe's car and the shelving units I'd installed along the back wall 2 summers ago when she'd complained about storage. I did not go through the interior door into the house. Instead, I stayed at the garage in the cold and listened. The door connecting the garage to the kitchen was hollow core, a detail I had noted when I first inspected the house and had meant to recommend they replace because hollow core interior doors offer approximately nothing in the way of sound insulation. Through it, voices were audible. Not every word, but enough. A man's voice I didn't recognize, deep, deliberate, with the cadence of someone accustomed to speaking in rooms where people paid attention. Not Julian. Someone older. Arthur Sterling. I had met Chloe's father-in-law 4 times. At the wedding, at 2 holiday dinners, and once at a summer gathering at their house in Connecticut that I had attended for 90 minutes before finding a reason to leave. Arthur Sterling was a real estate attorney out of Hartford who had retired 3 years ago with the kind of ease that suggested the retirement had been very well planned. He was 71 years old, silver-haired, and possessed of the particular confidence of a man who had spent decades being the smartest person in the room and had stopped questioning whether that was actually true. I did not like him. I had told Eleanor so after the wedding, and she had said, "You don't have to like him. You just have to watch him." She had been right, as she usually was about people. I moved closer to the door, Arthur's voice clearer now. Timeline is the only thing that matters at this point. If the filing happens before the asset transfer, the court can freeze everything pending evaluation. If it happens after, Chloe's voice lower, he'll notice. He pays attention to everything. He pays attention to what he's shown, Arthur said. The account withdrawals will read as routine on his end until the statement cycles. By then, we'll have the first evaluation on record. I stood very still. Evaluation. Julian's voice somewhere further from the door, the living room. Maybe Pendleton confirmed for Thursday. Chloe. Thursday at 2. I told Dad it was a routine wellness check. The cold in the garage was significant. My breath moved in front of me in slow, even clouds. I was aware of my heartbeat not racing, just present the way it gets when a job site shows you something you cannot unfind. Arthur again. The guardianship filing requires a documented pattern, not a single evaluation. We need at least 3 sessions on record before Hartwell can move forward. January 6th is realistic if Pendleton delivers. I heard my daughter say nothing for a moment. Then, what about the trip? The trip serves 2 purposes, Arthur said. It removes you from proximity during the filing preparation, and it establishes a record of Robert being left to manage independently. If he makes any unusual financial decisions while you're away, he won't, Chloe said. He's careful. Careful people make mistakes when they're lonely and unsupervised, Arthur said. That's what the evaluation will document. I took 1 step back from the door, then another. I walked out of the garage the way I had come in quietly, without rushing. The way you exit a site when you've seen the structural report, and you need to think before you speak to anyone. The morning air hit my face. I reached the car, got in, and sat. My hands were on the steering wheel. I thought about the word guardianship. I had heard it used in legal contexts before: their elderly clients, aging relatives, the machinery the law provides for people who can no longer manage their own affairs. It was a word that meant well in the hands of people who meant well. In the hands of Arthur Sterling, it was a word that meant something else entirely. I thought about the 3 withdrawals. $29,700 moved before sunrise while I sat with my coffee. I thought about Pendleton, whoever Pendleton was, and Thursday at 2 and the phrase documented pattern. I thought about January 6th and Hartwell and the particular satisfaction in Arthur Sterling's voice when he said, "Careful people make mistakes when they're lonely." He thought I was lonely. He thought lonely was the same as vulnerable. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, slowly signaled at the corner, and drove back toward the south end, the way I had come, same streets, same gray morning, same thin snow on the sidewalks. But the drive back was not the same as the drive there. The way a site walk is never the same after you've found the fault line. I knew what the structure looked like now, and I knew exactly where to apply pressure. The heater in my truck took a few minutes to kick in the way it always did in deep December, and I sat in the cold cab with both hands on the wheel and let the engine warm up while my mind did the opposite. Cold, precise, methodical. I had driven these streets for 40 years. The route from my house in the South End to Chloe's neighborhood in Chestnut Hill took 22 minutes on a quiet morning, 28, if you hit the lights wrong on Commonwealth Avenue. I knew every turn of it the way I knew the floor plan of every building I had ever constructed. But right now, the streets outside the windshield were just shapes moving past in the gray dawn light, because the part of my brain that navigated was running on automatic, while the rest of me was somewhere else entirely. 5:47 in the morning, 5:51, 5:54. I kept coming back to those timestamps. She had done it before she called me. That was the detail I could not stop turning over. At 5:47, while I was still asleep upstairs, while the Boston sky was still fully dark and the snow on the backyard was still undisturbed, Chloe had walked into a bank, or more likely an ATM, because ATMs don't ask questions and don't have faces, and withdrawn $9,900 in cash. then waited 4 minutes, then done it again, then waited 3 minutes, then done it again. $29,700, 7 minutes, before sunrise. Then she had come home or wherever she was, and waited until 6 o'clock to call me. In my line of work, I had dealt with enough financial audits, enough union payroll disputes, enough contract payment structures to understand exactly what those numbers represented. The Bank Secrecy Act of 1970 requires every financial institution in the United States to file a currency transaction report, a CTR, with the federal government whenever a customer conducts a cash transaction of $10,000 or more in a single day. The report goes directly to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, a bureau of the U.S. Treasury Department. It cannot be avoided, delayed, or negotiated. It is automatic, mandatory, and permanent. $9,900 falls below that threshold. Once. Fine. But 3 times in 7 minutes, each one just $100 under the federal wire. That is not a coincidence. That is not a woman who happened to need cash 3 times before breakfast. That is a woman who researched the reporting threshold, calculated how much she could take in a single morning without triggering federal paperwork, and executed the plan with the kind of precision that made my stomach turn, not because it was sophisticated, but because my daughter had looked at a law designed to catch criminals and had thought to herself, I can work around that. The legal term for it is structuring. Title 31 of the United States Code Section 5324. It is a federal crime regardless of whether the money itself is obtained legally. You do not have to be laundering drug money to be guilty of structuring. You simply have to deliberately break up transactions to avoid the reporting requirement, and the law treats it as seriously as the underlying financial crime it was designed to prevent. People have gone to federal prison for structuring their own perfectly legal money. Chloe had just committed a federal crime against an account that had her mother's fingerprints all over it. That thought hit me somewhere low and specific, like a boot heel finding a crack in concrete. Eleanor had sat at our kitchen table 12 years ago, both hands wrapped around her own coffee mug, and made the case for that account with the quiet certainty she brought to everything she believed in. Chloe had just graduated college. She was 22 years old, and the world was large and unpredictable, and Eleanor did not trust large, unpredictable things when it came to her only child. We set up a joint account, Eleanor had said, in the tone that meant the discussion was happening, not being discussed. Just the 3 of us. We put a reasonable amount in, we leave it alone, and it's there if she ever needs it. Medical emergency, job loss, car accident, in the middle of nowhere, whatever. She needs to know the net is there, Robert. Every young person does. I had agreed. Of course I had agreed. When Eleanor spoke about Chloe in that voice, that particular mixture of fierce love and quiet worry, I would have agreed to just about anything. We had funded that account together, built it up over years, adding to it quietly, never mentioning it to Chloe unless it was relevant. It sat there the way Eleanor had intended, a safety net, invisible and patient, waiting for a real emergency. My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel until I felt the tendons in the back of my hand pull taut. This was not what Eleanor had meant by emergency. I turned onto Commonwealth Avenue, the wide boulevard bare and salt-stained in the early morning. The old brownstones on either side still dark in their upper windows. A city bus moved slowly ahead of me, its rear lights red in the gray air. I followed it at a distance and thought about $29,700 in cash. The question that mattered was not where the money had gone. That was a fact I would establish eventually through channels I was already beginning to identify in my mind. The question that mattered was why it needed to be cash. Untraceable. Physical. The kind of money you hand to someone in an envelope or a bag, or across a table in a place that does not have cameras, because the transaction cannot exist on paper anywhere. You did not need $29,000 in untraceable cash to buy something legal. You needed it to pay someone for something that could not be documented, a service that could not be invoiced, a professional whose cooperation had a price tag, but whose name could never appear next to yours in any official record. Pendleton. I had written that name on the legal pad without knowing who it belonged to. Just instinct, the kind you develop after 40 years of reading situations the way other men read blueprints. Something in the pattern of what Chloe had done told me there was a professional involved. Someone with credentials. Someone whose value to her lay precisely in those credentials, in the weight a title or a license gave to a document, a statement, an evaluation. I did not yet know who Dr. Arthur Pendleton was. I did not know his specialty, his practice, his connection to the Sterling family. But I knew with the certainty of a man who had spent his career identifying structural rot before it became structural failure that the name I had written down was correct. I turned off Commonwealth onto the long, curving road that led up through Chestnut Hill, the neighborhood growing quieter and more expensive, with every block the houses set further back from the street, behind mature oak trees and long driveways. This was where Chloe lived now. This was the world she had chosen, or rather, the world she had married into and then decided suited her better than the world she'd come from. I parked 2 blocks from her house on a side street where my truck would not be visible from her driveway. I sat for a moment with the engine off the December cold, already beginning to reclaim the cab. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small spiral notebook I carried everywhere, habit from my contracting days when you always needed something to write on. I flipped to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote the date. Beneath it, I wrote things I know, things I don't know yet, things I need to find out before I do anything else. I filled in the first column quickly. Booking hijacked. Sterling family installed. Platinum card still active deliberately. $29,700 structured out of Eleanor's account. Professional possibly involved Pendleton. The second column was longer. Why Pendleton? What does he provide that costs $30,000 in cash? Who connected them? What is the full plan? Because this is a plan, not a tantrum. The third column had one item: go inside. Listen before you speak. I pocketed the notebook, pulled the garage code from my memory, 6 digits. I had never written down anywhere, because some things you simply do not forget, and stepped out into the cold. The snow crunched softly under my boots as I walked the 2 blocks toward my daughter's house. Hands in my coat pockets, shoulders squared against the wind coming off the hills. A cardinal landed on a snow-covered hedge to my left and regarded me with one bright, unblinking eye before deciding I was not interesting and flying away. I watched it go. Then I turned up the driveway of the house I had purchased for my daughter. With my own money, walked to the side entrance of the garage and pressed 6 digits into the keypad. The lock disengaged with a soft, familiar click. Before I reveal the sinister plot to strip away my entire life's work and dignity exposed right there in that kitchen, comment the words, "Still here," so I know you are standing with me through this critical turning point. Also, please note the following events include some fictionalized elements to enhance the educational message and viewing experience. If this content isn't right for you, feel free to turn off the video right here. The garage smelled of cedar and cold motor oil, the kind of smell that takes you back 30 years without asking permission. I stood just inside the door, letting my eyes adjust to the low light. Chloe's Range Rover sat to my left, Julian's BMW to my right. Between them, a narrow side hallway led toward the kitchen lined with the kind of crown molding I'd installed myself 6 years ago when they first bought this house. Back then, she'd hugged me in this very doorway and said, "Dad, it's perfect." I'd believed her. I didn't turn on any lights. The house was quiet in the way that Sunday mornings used to be quiet when Eleanor was still alive, that gentle waiting hush before the coffee finished brewing. But this wasn't Sunday, and there was nothing gentle about why I was here. I moved slowly down the hallway, my boots quiet on the hardwood. Construction work teaches you how to move through a structure without disturbing it. 40 years of walking unfinished buildings in the dark, testing load-bearing walls with your palm listening for the groan of a beam under pressure, that knowledge doesn't leave you. It just finds new places to be useful. I heard voices before I reached the kitchen doorway. He sounded confused on the phone. "Did you catch that?" Chloe's voice. Sharp, pleased. "That's exactly what we need." A man's voice I recognized immediately. I had met him twice at family dinners. Both times he'd looked at me the way a contractor looks at a load estimate, calculating what he could get out of it. I pressed my back against the hallway wall just outside the kitchen arch. My heart was knocking hard against my ribs, but I kept my breathing slow. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Eleanor used to tell me to breathe when the job sites got overwhelming. "Slow down, Robert. The building isn't going anywhere." "He's not confused," Chloe said, and I heard the clink of a coffee cup being set down. "He just doesn't know what's happening yet. There's a difference." "Either way, Pendleton needs 3 sessions minimum," Arthur said. "He told me last night he can't file the affidavit on a single evaluation. There has to be a documented pattern." The name landed in my chest like a dropped wrench. Pendleton. Dr. Arthur Pendleton, the name I'd scrawled on my legal pad an hour ago. Suddenly it wasn't a question mark anymore. 3 sessions. Chloe's voice was flat impatient. "That's going to take weeks. 2 weeks at most. We schedule them close together. Pendleton runs his clinic in Brookline. He can see Robert every 4 days, and no one thinks anything of it. We tell Robert it's a routine geriatric wellness check. Men his age go willingly. They want to believe they're healthy." I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the December air. Routine geriatric wellness check. I could hear exactly how Chloe would say it. Warm practiced the voice she used when she wanted something. The voice she had used on me 100 times. "And after the 3 sessions," Chloe asked, "Pendleton files his physician affidavit with the probate and family court. We attach it to the guardianship petition. Once that's accepted for review, the court can issue a temporary order within 14 days, freezing Robert's ability to sell assets, transfer funds, or make major financial decisions without a guardian's approval." There was a pause. I heard the refrigerator open and close. "And the guardian would be," Chloe started. "You," Arthur said simply. "As his daughter, you have standing. The petition names you as proposed guardian. If the court accepts it, you control the trust, the Bellevue property, the accounts, everything." My hands were trembling. Not from fear, I want to be clear about that. My hands were trembling the way they used to tremble on the morning of a major demolition, when the charges were set, and the countdown had started, and there was no undoing what came next. It was not fear. It was the physical recognition of a threshold being crossed. "What about the house sale?" Chloe asked. "If he figures out what we're doing before Pendleton files." "He won't," Arthur said, with the confidence of a man who had spent 30 years in courtrooms. "Robert Vance is a smart man, but he is also a grieving man. Grief makes people predictable. They want to believe the best about their family. They want to be wrong about what they're feeling." He paused. "And we've been patient. The groundwork started 8 months ago." 8 months. I pressed my palm flat against the wall to steady myself. My throat had gone completely dry. 8 months ago was April, when Chloe had first started suggesting I take it easy, had started asking about my doctor's appointments, had started calling weekly to ask if I'd been forgetting things. I'd thought she was worried about me. I'd been touched by it. I heard paper rustling, footsteps crossing toward the kitchen island. "These are the billing receipts," Chloe said. 4 visits to Pendleton's clinic already. I told Robert they were checkups with Dr. Harmon. He didn't question it. Why would he? He trusts me. He trusts me. She said it the way you'd say, "The door is unlocked." A simple fact about a practical reality. Not cruel exactly, just indifferent. As though my trust in her were a feature of a building she was renovating, something load-bearing that she'd decided to remove. I slid my phone from my jacket pocket. My fingers were steady now, steadier than I expected. I opened the camera, turned off the flash, and leaned just far enough around the doorframe to frame the island countertop where Chloe stood holding a manila folder. Arthur sat across from her on a bar stool, his phone face down, a legal notepad open beside his coffee cup. I could see the billing receipts clearly enough. 4 lines. 4 dates. Pendleton Behavioral Health, Brookline, Massachusetts. Each receipt marked as Geriatric Cognitive Assessment, patient Robert Arthur Vance. I took 3 photographs. Then I pulled back into the hallway. "What about Bradley?" Chloe asked, lowering the folder. "Bradley is fine," Arthur said, and his tone shifted slightly, just enough for me to catch the edge in it. "He stays out of the legal filings. His job was the account. He did that. His job was the account. The $29,700. 3 $9,900 ATM pulls." Bradley Sterling. Chloe's brother-in-law had been the one to drain Eleanor's emergency fund, not Chloe herself. Bradley. The same Bradley who would now be boarding a $60,000 Switzerland trip on my platinum card. I had the full picture now. Not every edge of it, not every corner, but the structural drawing was complete enough to read. Guardianship petition. False medical evaluations. Drained joint account. Hijacked booking. The Bellevue Trust. My name methodically removed from my own life, one signature at a time. I moved back down the hallway the way I had come in. Slow. Quiet. Each step deliberate. When I reached the garage door and stepped out into the cold, gray morning, I did not look back at the house. I had built it for her. I had milled the crown, molding myself from salvaged white oak. I had spent 3 Saturdays in this driveway mixing tinted caulk to match the original trim color because Chloe had said she wanted it perfect. She had wanted something perfect, all right. Just not me. I sat in the truck for a moment, photo-saved phone face down on the passenger seat. Outside, a cardinal landed on the bare branch of the oak at the property line, a small shock of red against the white sky. Eleanor had loved cardinals. She used to say they were messengers, that when you saw one, someone who loved you was close. I exhaled slowly and started the engine. If she was watching, I hope she understood what came next, because I wasn't going to wait for a court date. I was going to act before Arthur Sterling ever made it to a filing desk. I got home at 8:30. The South End townhouse felt different when I walked through the front door, not smaller, not emptier, just sharper somehow, the way a job site feels on the morning. You know the demo crew is coming. Every edge more defined, every surface more deliberately itself. I set my keys on the hall table, hung my coat on the rack Eleanor had picked out at an antique market in Cambridge 11 years ago, a tall iron piece with hooks shaped like ginkgo leaves. She had carried it to the car herself, refusing help, laughing when it bumped her knee. I ran my thumb along the top edge of it now just for a second. Then I went to my study. I sat down at the desk, opened my notebook, and read through what I had. The 3 $9,900 withdrawals. The photographs from Chloe's kitchen. Arthur Sterling's voice laying out the guardianship timeline like a man who had done this before, maybe not to family, but in courtrooms, in settlements, in the quiet rooms where other people's lives got divided up and reassigned. Dr. Pendleton's billing receipts, 4 visits already on the books. Bradley confirmed as the hands behind the account. The structure of it was almost admirable in the way that a well-built trap is admirable. Patient. Layered. Designed to look like concern from the outside. But every structure has a load-bearing point. You find it, you apply pressure at the right angle, and the whole thing comes apart faster than the people who built it ever expected. I picked up my phone and called Julian Sterling. He answered on the second ring, which told me he was already awake and alert. Already waiting, maybe. Already part of this. Robert. His voice carried that particular blend of practiced warmth and careful distance that I had noticed at every family dinner for the past 3 years. Julian Sterling, 35 years old, financial consultant out of Back Bay. The kind of man who always knew the right thing to say and said it just slightly too smoothly. "Julian," I said. And then I let a pause sit there, 3 full seconds of nothing. Long enough to feel uncertain. Long enough to feel like an old man collecting his thoughts. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern shading into something else, something I now recognized as anticipation. Yes, I think so." I let my voice come out slower than usual, softer around the edges. "I got a call this morning, from Chloe, about the trip." "Right." Carefully neutral. She said maybe it would be better if I didn't come." I paused again. Let the silence do the work. "I was a little surprised. I thought I had planned the whole thing, you know. I thought we were going together, Robert." Julian's voice shifted into something lower, something that wanted to sound gentle. "We've been worried about you, all of us. You've been through so much this past year, and we thought maybe the travel, the altitude, all of it might be a lot. We didn't want anything to happen to you. We didn't want anything to happen to you." I felt the full weight of that sentence land in my chest. I knew exactly what it meant and what it didn't mean. But I kept my voice where I needed it, slightly unsteady, slightly confused, the voice of a man who wasn't sure what to believe. "I appreciate that," I said slowly. "I do. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been a little tired lately, forgetting things here and there." I let out a small breath that sounded like resignation. "Do you think it would be better if I talked to someone, a doctor maybe?" The pause on Julian's end lasted exactly 1 beat too long. "Actually," he said. And there it was, the smoothness dropping away just slightly, replaced by something that wanted to sound casual. "Chloe did mention a doctor, someone she thought might be good to talk to, just to make sure everything is all right." "Pendleton," I said, and I made sure my voice sounded like I was reading the name off a piece of paper, uncertain, unfamiliar, not like a man who had photographed billing receipts 90 minutes ago in his daughter's kitchen. "Yes," Julian said carefully. "Dr. Pendleton. He comes very highly recommended, very experienced with men in your stage of life." "Men in your stage of life. That sounds reasonable," I said. And I let my voice soften 1 more degree, just enough to give him exactly what he was hoping for. Maybe I should see him. Maybe it would put everyone's minds at ease. "I think it would," Julian said, and now I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, clean and unmistakable. The particular satisfaction of a man who believes the hardest part of a plan has just succeeded. "I'll have Chloe set it up when we get back from the trip." "Yes," I said. "You go enjoy Switzerland. Don't worry about me." We said our goodbyes, cordial, brief, the way people talk when they think they've already won. I set the phone face down on the desk. For a moment I sat there with my hands flat on the oak surface. Eleanor's desk, technically the one she'd used for 30 years to write letters and pay bills and keep the books for my company in the early days before we could afford an accountant. The wood was worn smooth in the center from decades of her forearms resting there. I pressed my palms into that worn spot and let myself feel it. Then I opened my contacts and pulled up a number I hadn't called in 14 months. Robert Sanchez. Former Boston PD, 12 years on the force before he went private. I'd hired him twice before, once to run background checks on a project partner, who turned out to be operating under a shell company, once when a subcontractor disappeared with a $40,000 materials advance. Sanchez was methodical, discreet, and he understood how men like Arthur Sterling operated because he had spent a career watching them. The phone rang twice. "Sanchez." Flat direct. A man who answered calls the way he entered rooms, already paying attention. "It's Robert Vance. I need you today." A short pause. The sound of something being set down. "What kind of work? Surveillance? Documentation. A family situation that is about to become a legal situation. I kept my voice even. I need eyes on 4 people, locations, activity, contacts, starting immediately and running through at least the next 2 weeks. Rate is the same as last time, Sanchez said. No hesitation. That's fine. I'll send you the names and photos within the hour. First priority, I need confirmation of travel departures from Logan Airport. Specific date is December 16th, tomorrow morning. I paused. I need to know the moment they are wheels up and out of the country. Understood. Another brief pause, then family situation, you said. Yes. How bad? I looked at the worn center of Eleanor's desk. I thought about Arthur Sterling's voice explaining guardianship timelines over morning coffee. I thought about 4 fraudulent billing receipts and $29,700 pulled in 3 careful withdrawals, and my name erased from a reservation I had paid for with 40 years of work. Bad enough, I said. But I've seen worse job sites come back from worse damage. I paused. I'll be in touch within the hour. I ended the call. Outside the study window, the December sky had gone from gray to the particular white that means snow is coming, the flat pressurized white that Boston construction workers learned to read by their second winter on the job. It meant the ground was about to change. Everything that had been visible would be covered, and everything covered would have to be dug out again. I had spent my life doing exactly that. I reached for my phone one more time and scrolled to a name I had trusted for 22 years. Mitchell Reed. Mitchell Reed's office occupied the northeast corner of the 38th floor, which meant on clear days you could see all the way across the harbor to East Boston, and on the best days catch the outline of Logan Airport's runways through the glass. Today was not a clear day. The December sky had thickened into the flat white I'd noted from my study window, and the harbor below was the color of old pewter, dull, heavy, pressing down. I had called Mitchell from the car. He'd been in a deposition, but when his assistant told him Robert Vance was on the line and that it was urgent, he'd stepped out within 2 minutes. That was 22 years of trust working in real time. Some things you build and they hold. His assistant, a composed woman in her 40s named Patricia, met me at the elevator and walked me directly to the conference room without stopping at reception. No sign-in sheet. No waiting. Mitchell had anticipated that I wouldn't want a paper trail at the front desk, and he'd arranged accordingly. He was already standing when I walked in. Mitchell Reed was 58 years old, broad-shouldered in the way of men who had played college football, and never entirely left it behind, with close-cropped gray hair, and the kind of face that had learned over decades of sitting across from people in crisis to stay very still. He wore a dark suit, no tie, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He'd been working. Robert. He crossed the room and gripped my hand with both of his. Not the polished two-handed shake of a man performing concern, but the grip of someone who genuinely wanted to take the measure of whether you were holding up. Sit down. Tell me everything. So I did. I laid it out in the order. It had happened the 6 a.m. Call from Chloe, the hijacked reservation, the 3 $9,900 withdrawals, the overheard conversation. In the hallway, Arthur Sterling's voice describing the guardianship timeline, the billing receipts from Pendleton's clinic, the false surrender call to Julian. I set my phone on the conference table and showed him the photographs I had taken in Chloe's kitchen. I told him about Robert Sanchez and the surveillance that was already running. Mitchell did not interrupt. He listened the way good lawyers listen, with his full body leaning forward slightly, one hand flat on the table, eyes moving between my face and the photos on the phone screen. When I finished, he sat back, removed his reading glasses from his forehead, and turned them over slowly in his hands. "How long have you known about the trust setup?" he asked. "Eleanor and I drew it up with you in 2019, I said. "Revocable living trust. The Bellevue property, the joint accounts, the company holdings, all of it went in. And you haven't changed the trust terms since Eleanor passed. No. Mitchell nodded slowly. He stood, walked to the credenza along the wall, and opened a drawer. When he came back to the table, he set down a manila folder. Not thin, thick. The kind of thickness that means someone has been doing significant work. I need to show you something, he said. And I want you to understand that what I'm about to show you was brought to my attention 3 days ago by a colleague at the court. He opened the folder. Inside was a document I recognized immediately by its formatting the style of a petition for guardianship and conservatorship, Massachusetts, probate and family court. The caption at the top named me as the respondent. In re Robert Arthur Vance, an incapacitated person. My name followed by the words incapacitated person in 12-point Times New Roman on a court filing that had already been drafted, formatted, and according to the date stamp on the upper right, reviewed by an attorney. The filing attorney of record was a man named Gerald Hartwell, with an address in Hartford, Connecticut. The same city Arthur Sterling had practiced law in for 30 years. This hasn't been filed yet, Mitchell said carefully. As of this morning, it is still in draft status, but my colleague tells me the intent is to file it in the first week of January, specifically January 6th. The timing is deliberate. He set his glasses on the table. If they file on the 6th and the court accepts it for review, a judge could issue a temporary suspension of your legal capacity within 14 days. That would mean by January 20th, you could be legally prevented from making any financial decisions, including revoking the trust selling property or moving assets without a guardian's approval. The conference room was very quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a single gull crossed the white sky heading south. The physician affidavit, I said. Pendleton. Yes. Mitchell tapped the folder. The petition is structured to attach a physician's affidavit from a Dr. Arthur Pendleton of Brookline, attesting that you exhibit signs of early-stage cognitive decline, specifically, quote, difficulty with complex financial decision-making, increased emotional volatility, and episodes of confusion regarding recent events. 3 evaluation sessions are listed as the basis. He's only conducted 4, I said, disguised as routine wellness visits. I have billing receipts from Chloe's kitchen with my name on them. Visits, I was told, were with my regular physician. Mitchell's jaw tightened. It was a small movement, but I'd known him long enough to understand it. That was the expression he wore when something crossed from aggressive lawyering into something he considered genuinely wrong. Submitting a fraudulent physician affidavit to a probate court is a serious matter, he said. Medical fraud. Potentially elder financial abuse under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 19. That's not a civil issue, Robert. That is a criminal exposure for Pendleton, for whoever directed him, and for the filing attorney if he knew the affidavit was fabricated. Arthur Sterling knew, I said. I heard him say it himself. Then we have work to do. Mitchell leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand about where you stand right now. You are still the grantor of that revocable living trust. Under Massachusetts law, and this is absolute, a grantor retains the right to revoke or amend a revocable trust at any time provided they are of sound mind and legal capacity at the time of revocation. He looked at me directly. You are of sound mind. You have never been evaluated by a legitimate physician and found otherwise, which means the window to act is now before any court filing changes that status. How long does a revocation take? I asked. If we draft the notice of revocation today and file it with the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds, the trust is dissolved and the assets revert directly to you as an individual, no longer shielded inside the trust structure, which means no longer accessible through a guardianship petition targeting trust assets. He paused. Realistically, with a paralegal runner and the right contacts at the registry, we can have the recording confirmed within 2 hours of signing. 2 hours, I said. 2 hours. He held my gaze. Robert, once that notice is recorded, Chloe's petition, even if filed, cannot reach the Bellevue property or the trust holdings. They would be targeting assets that no longer exist inside the trust. The whole legal basis of the guardianship attempt collapses. I thought about Arthur Sterling's voice, confident, rehearsed the voice of a man who had spent 3 decades dismantling other people's arrangements from the inside of courtrooms. I thought about the word incapacitated, printed neatly beneath my name on a document that had been drafted while I was still bringing dinner to Chloe's house on Sundays, still showing up to family events, still believing the best. "There's something else," Mitchell said. He reached into the folder and produced a second sheet, a financial summary. "I had my paralegal run a preliminary asset review this morning after you called. The Bellevue property, the one currently held inside the trust, has a current assessed value of approximately $2.2 million. He set the sheet on the table. "If we revoke the trust and you choose to sell the property, there is no legal barrier to doing so as a private individual. You would not need any court approval. You would not need guardian consent. You would simply need a buyer." I looked at the number on the sheet. $2,200,000. Eleanor had painted every room. She had stood on a stepladder in the living room, roller in hand, laughing at the paint in her hair, and said, "Robert, I think we built something real." She had been right in every sense of the word. And now I was going to use it. Mitchell reached into the credenza drawer one more time and came back with a single sheet of clean paper, the draft. Notice of revocation already typed, already structured under Massachusetts trust law, already waiting for one thing. He set it on the table in front of me and placed a pen beside it. "Whenever you're ready," he said quietly. I picked up the pen. The pen was heavier than it should have been. That was the first thing I noticed. The physical weight of it in my hand, a simple ballpoint that Mitchell had probably pulled from a cup on his credenza without thinking twice. But my hand felt it differently. The way you feel the weight of a demolition order the morning before a crew arrives. The paper in front of you is just paper. The signature is just ink. But what happens after is irreversible, and some part of your body understands that before your mind finishes deciding. I read the document once, then I read it again. Notice of revocation of revocable living trust. The Robert and Eleanor Vance Family Trust, established April 14th, 2019. Pursuant to the terms of said trust and applicable Massachusetts law, the grantor hereby exercises his right to revoke said trust in its entirety, effective upon proper recording with the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds. All assets previously held in trust shall revert to the individual ownership of Robert Arthur Vance. All assets previously held in trust. The Bellevue property. The investment accounts Eleanor and I had built together over 4 decades. The secondary holdings from the company's final years. Everything we had layered together carefully, the way you build a foundation, not in a single pour, but in stages, each one cured and tested before the next went down. Eleanor had sat in this same building, different floor, different year, and signed her name beside mine when we first created the trust. She had worn a blue dress that day, the one with the small pearl buttons at the collar. I remembered because she had been nervous the way she always got nervous around formal documents, and she had gripped my hand under the table while Mitchell explained the terms. Afterward, we'd walked down to the harbor and had clam chowder at a place that wasn't there anymore. I signed my name, Robert Arthur Vance. The same signature I had put on 40 years of contracts, permits, and deeds. Steady, legible. The handwriting of a man who had always known what he was agreeing to. Mitchell witnessed it immediately, then pressed his notary seal to the lower margin, clean, authoritative, the mechanical thunk of it, cutting through the quiet of the conference room. He handed the document to his paralegal, a young man named Davis, who had been waiting just inside the door. "Registry of Deeds," Mitchell said. "Recording desk. Today before 4 o'clock. "Yes, sir." Davis had the document in a folder and was already moving. Mitchell turned back to me. "He'll make it. The registry closes at 4:30. We have time." He sat down across from me and refilled his coffee from the carafe on the table. Now, while we wait for confirmation, let's talk about what comes next. The property, I said. The property. He nodded. Once the revocation is recorded, the Bellevue house reverts to you as an individual. You can sell it. You can rent it. You can give it away. There is no trustee structure, no court oversight, no petition that can interfere with your right to dispose of it as you see fit. He paused. But I want to be honest with you about timing. A standard real estate transaction listing showing offer inspection financing contingency closing takes 60 to 90 days minimum. That is too slow. I know, I said. I need it done before January 6th. Mitchell looked at me steadily. That is 22 days from today. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a gust of wind pushed against the glass. The building was engineered to flex slightly in high wind, a fact most occupants never noticed, but that I had always found oddly reassuring. Good structures move. Rigid ones crack. There is a way, Mitchell said finally. Cash buyers. Investors who purchase residential property as is without inspection contingencies, without financing delays. The trade-off is price they will offer significantly below market value because they are absorbing all the risk and expediting the timeline. He tilted his head. I know someone who operates that way. Does volume in the Boston to Providence corridor. He can close in 72 hours if the title is clean. How far below market? 15 to 20%. On a $2.2 million property, you're looking at somewhere between $1.76 million and $1.87 million. I did the arithmetic without writing it down. $1,760,000 at the low end. 41 years ago, I had paid $87,000 for that lot and built the house with my own hands. I had never once thought of it primarily as money, but the people who had drafted a fraudulent court petition with my name in the caption had made it about money. And so now I would speak the only language they had chosen to use. Who is he? I asked. Victor Rossi, Mitchell said. Development group out of Providence. He buys distressed and transitional properties, tears them down, builds higher density residential. He is not a gentle buyer, Robert. He will strip the property to the foundation within 30 days of closing. He held my gaze. I want you to know that before you decide. Victor Rossi would take it down to the studs and pour new footings. Make the call, I said. Mitchell nodded once, reached for his phone and dialed. I listened to him speak in the shorthand of men who have done business together before, not warmth exactly, but the efficient ease of established trust. He gave Rossi the address. He gave him the approximate square footage and lot dimensions. He said the word motivated once, which in real estate means the seller will not negotiate sentiment-only terms. He hung up and looked at me. Rossi can meet tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. He'll have a preliminary offer by end of day. I nodded. At 3:17 p.m., Mitchell's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, then slid it across to me. I read it twice. The trust was gone. The structure Eleanor and I had built to protect everything we'd worked for had been dissolved in the space of 2 hours and 8 minutes, not by the people who had tried to weaponize it against me, but by my own hand, on my own terms, before they ever got the chance. There was no satisfaction in it. Not yet. What I felt instead was the particular clarity that comes at the beginning of a controlled demolition, when the charges are set, and the site is cleared, and everything that happens next will happen because you decided it would. I handed the phone back to Mitchell. What time does your office open tomorrow? I asked. 7:30. I'll be here at 7:30, I said. With everything I have on Pendleton. Mitchell picked up his legal pad and uncapped his pen. Then let's make sure you walk in ready. We worked for another 40 minutes, mapping the evidence, establishing the sequence, identifying what would go to the medical board and what Mitchell would hold in reserve for the civil case. By the time I stood to leave, the winter sky outside the windows had gone from white to the deep gray blue of early dusk. The harbor lights were beginning to come on below, small and precise against the dark water. I buttoned my coat in the elevator. Tomorrow morning, Victor Rossi. Tonight I had one more call to make. The night before, I had called Sanchez from my kitchen table at 9:30. He answered the same way he always did, flat immediate, already paying attention. He told me Chloe had not left the Chestnut Hill house all evening. Julian's BMW had pulled into the garage at 7:15 and hadn't moved. Arthur Sterling's rental car was still parked on the street 2 doors down, which told me Arthur was staying close. Bradley Sterling had been tracked to a bar in the Back Bay at 8 o'clock, where he had run up a tab that Sanchez described without editorial comment as ambitious. "They're not moving until tomorrow morning," Sanchez said. "Flights scheduled for 6:50 a.m. out of Logan. Terminal E. Stay on them until wheels up," I said. "I want confirmation the moment they clear international departure." "You'll have it." I slept for 4 hours. Not from anxiety. I had moved past anxiety somewhere between signing the revocation and watching Davis walk out of Mitchell's office with the folder. What kept me awake was the kind of focused alertness that used to come on the night before a major pour, when everything had been planned and checked, and the only thing left was execution. Sleep felt beside the point. I was at the Bellevue property at 7:50. I had driven myself, which felt important. The house sat on a tree-lined street in the Chestnut Hill neighborhood, not Chloe's block, but close enough that I had driven past her house on the way out of habit, or something I didn't want to name. The street was quiet in the way of expensive neighborhoods on winter mornings. No foot traffic, no noise, just the sound of wind in the bare oaks and the faint smell of someone's fireplace 2 houses down. I stood on the front walk and looked at the house for a long moment. 41 years old by the structure. I had framed it in the summer of 1984, working weekends alongside 2 crew members who were now retired. The roofline was the original pitch, a detail I had been stubborn about when the architect had suggested something more fashionable. "The pitch sheds snow," I had said. "Fashion doesn't matter to a roof." Eleanor had laughed. The architect had not. The front door was unlocked. I still had my key. Inside, the house smelled of closed rooms and the particular cold that settles into a structure when no one has been living in it. I had moved out 14 months ago after Eleanor passed. The house had felt too large in a way I hadn't anticipated, every room holding a version of her that I couldn't quite reach. I had gone back to the South End townhouse and told myself I would decide what to do with Bellevue later. Later had arrived. I walked through the front hall past the white oak staircase into the kitchen. The east-facing window was exactly as I remembered, the morning light coming through at a low winter angle, pale and clean, hitting the countertop in a long rectangle. I stood in it for a moment, with my hands in my coat pockets. "I think we built something real." "Mr. Vance?" The voice came from the front doorway. I turned. Victor Rossi was 54 years old, built like a man who had spent his 20s doing physical work before his 30s made him rich enough to stop. Broad across the shoulders, thick through the hands, with close-cropped dark hair going silver at the temples, and the kind of unhurried confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from having closed enough deals that the outcome of one more doesn't make him nervous. He wore a wool overcoat and carried a leather portfolio. Behind him, 2 men with clipboards waited on the front walk. "Mr. Rossi." I crossed the kitchen and shook his hand. His grip was firm and brief, the handshake of a man who has learned that excessive warmth in a business context reads as desperation. "Mitchell speaks well of you," Rossi said, moving into the front hall and beginning a slow, methodical scan of the space ceiling, height, floor condition, wall angles. The way a buyer looks at a property is not the same as the way an owner looks at it. The owner sees history. The buyer sees potential. Rossi was looking at load-bearing walls and lot dimensions. "Mitchell speaks well of you too," I said. "That's why we're here." Rossi moved through the ground floor in 15 minutes. He didn't open drawers or test fixtures. He was assessing structure, not finishes. He looked at the basement, briefly noted the foundation condition, checked the electrical panel. One of his men photographed every room. The other made notes on the clipboard without speaking. When Rossi came back to the kitchen, he set his portfolio on the counter and opened it. "Here's where I am," he said without preamble. "The structure is sound. The lot is 6,200 square feet, which works for what we do. Location is strong. We've had interest in this corridor for 2 years. He looked at me directly. "My number is $1.76 million. Cash. As is. No inspection contingency, no financing contingency. I'll have my title company run an expedited search 24 hours. If the title comes back clean, we close in 72 hours from today." "That's December 19th, I said. "Yes." He paused. "Mitchell told me timing matters." "It does. Then $1.76 is the number that makes timing possible." He held my gaze steadily. There was no apology in it, and no aggression, just the arithmetic of a man who understood that he was providing a service that had a specific value and was pricing it accordingly. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Vance. At full market, you'd wait 60 to 90 days minimum. I can give you 72 hours and a wire transfer on closing day. The 20% is the cost of the clock." I had built enough structures to understand load and cost. Every shortcut has a price. The question is whether the price is worth what you're buying. I was buying time certainty and the ability to act before Arthur Sterling's attorney made it to a filing desk in January. "What happens to the property after closing?" I asked. I already knew the answer. I wanted to hear him say it. Rossi looked at me with something that might have been respect, or might have been the recognition of a man who does not flinch from facts. "We'll begin interior demo within 30 days. Full gut to the studs. Depending on the structural assessment, we may go down to the foundation." He paused. "It's a good lot, Mr. Vance. Whatever we build here will be well constructed." "I know it will be," I said. "I know what the foundation looks like." Something shifted in Rossi's expression, brief, almost imperceptible. He was a man who had bought hundreds of properties from people who had histories inside them, and he had learned, I suspected, when to let a moment sit. He let this one sit. Then he reached into the portfolio and produced a purchase and sale agreement, clean, already drafted to the address, and the agreed terms with the price of $1,760,000 typed in the appropriate field. Massachusetts Standard Form modified for cash transaction. "I had Mitchell's office send over the terms last night," he said. "Everything we discussed is in there. You can have your attorney review it, of course. But if you're ready—" "I'm ready," I said. I did not read it the way a nervous man reads a contract looking for escape routes. I read it the way I had always read contracts, methodically, top to bottom, verifying that what was written matched what had been agreed. It did. Every line, the price, the timeline, the as-is condition, the closing date of December 19th, 2025. I signed on the designated line. Rossi countersigned immediately. His 2 men witnessed it. The whole thing took 4 minutes. "Wire instructions will go to Mitchell's office by end of day," Rossi said, closing the portfolio. He extended his hand again. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Vance." "Likewise," I said. He and his men were gone within 2 minutes. The front door closed behind them, and the house went quiet again. I stood in the kitchen with the signed copy of the purchase and sale agreement in my hand, and the morning light still coming through the east window at its low winter angle. I set the document on the counter. I looked at the window one more time. Then I took out my phone and checked the time. It was 9:47. Sanchez had not yet sent confirmation of departure from Logan, which meant Chloe was still on the ground. I had 2 hours, maybe 3, before they boarded, and I still had the joint account to deal with. Sanchez called at 10:23. I was sitting in my car outside the Bellevue property engine, running heat on the signed purchase and sale agreement on the passenger seat, still carrying the faint smell of Rossi's portfolio leather. I had not driven away yet. I had been doing what I sometimes do after a major decision, sitting with it for a few minutes. letting the weight of it settle before moving to the next thing. Eleanor used to call it the contractor's pause. She said I did it after every significant pour, every major framing completion. I would go quiet for 5 minutes and then come back sharper than before. "They're through security," Sanchez said. "All 5 of them. Chloe, Julian, the 2 Sterlings, and Bradley. Checked 4 bags, no carry-on issues. They're in the international terminal." "Bradley too," I said. Not a question. Bradley too. He looked like a man who'd had 3 hours of sleep and was already planning his first drink on the plane. A brief pause. "They board in 40 minutes. Wheels Up is on schedule 6:50. Departure is running on time." "Thank you, Robert. One more thing," Sanchez said. "Arthur Sterling made a phone call in the terminal. I couldn't get the number, but the call lasted 4 minutes, and he was writing on his phone notepad the whole time. Could be nothing. Could be Hartwell," I said. Gerald Hartwell, the Hartford attorney whose name was on the drafted guardianship petition. That's what I was thinking. Stay on it. I want to know if Hartwell files anything before January 6th, any preliminary motion, any emergency petition, anything with Robert Arthur Vance's name on it. Understood. I'll have eyes on the court docket. I ended the call and set the phone on the dashboard. They were gone. Or close enough to gone. Wheels Up in 40 minutes meant they were past the point of turning around without significant consequence. The international terminal at Logan is not a place you exit and re-enter casually once you've cleared security and checked bags into the system. The clock was now running in my favor. I drove to my bank, a branch of First Harbor Trust on Boylston Street, that I had used for 31 years, long enough that the branch manager knew my name and my handshake. I did not call ahead. I walked in at 10:45, asked for a private desk, and sat down in front of one of the bank's dedicated terminals. The joint account, formally titled the Vance Family Emergency Reserve, had been opened in 2003. Eleanor's idea. She had read something about the importance of liquid emergency funds and had insisted we set aside a dedicated account separate from the operating accounts, separate from the investment portfolio. We had fed it slowly over 20 years, adding to it the way you add to a foundation, steadily, without urgency, because the point was not the money itself, but the security of knowing it was there. The current balance as of this morning was $412,847.53. The $29,700 that Bradley had extracted in 3 structured withdrawals had already been moved. That money was gone, untraceable cash in someone's pocket, or safe, or wherever it had been directed. I could not recover it today. What I could do was ensure that the remaining $412,847.53 did not follow it. Under U.S. banking law, a joint account holder has the legal right to withdraw or transfer the entire account balance without the consent or notification of the other account holder. There is no requirement for agreement, no waiting period, no court order. The account is jointly owned, which means either owner has full access to the full balance at any time. Chloe was the other name on this account. She had been added in 2021, 2 years after Eleanor passed, when I had restructured my estate planning, and Chloe had asked gently, reasonably, in the voice she used when she wanted something to be included in case anything happened. I logged into the terminal. I initiated a wire transfer, not an ACH, which would take 1 to 3 business days to settle, but a Fed wire transfer, which moves funds in real time through the Federal Reserve's wire system and completes within hours of submission. The destination account was a corporate holding account I had established through Mitchell's office in 2018 for project escrow purposes, fully in my name. No joint holders, no shared access. I typed in the transfer amount, $412,847.53. I reviewed the routing information twice. Then I confirmed the transfer. The screen processed for 11 seconds. I counted them. The way you count the seconds after a controlled charge detonates, waiting for the structure to respond. Then the confirmation appeared, transfer initiated. Estimated completion 12:45 p.m., December 16th, 2025. Reference number FW-2025-884203. I sat back in the chair. The joint account balance now read $0. I looked at that number for a moment. $0.00 in an account that Eleanor had opened because she believed in preparing for emergencies, because she had understood in the quiet and practical way she understood most things, that the world could shift without warning, and you needed solid ground to stand on when it did. The emergency had come, not the kind she had imagined, but I had used the account the way she would have wanted it used to hold the line. My phone buzzed on the desk. Sanchez wheels up. 10:58 a.m. Flight confirmed international departure. All 5 passengers boarded. I read the message twice. Then I typed back, confirmed. Stand down from airport. New assignment incoming. I thanked the bank officer, who had been waiting discreetly nearby, and walked out onto Boylston Street. The wind had picked up since morning, a sharp, dry December wind coming off the harbor, the kind that makes your eyes water whether you want them to or not. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in my coat pockets, and let it hit me. Somewhere over the Atlantic or close to it, 5 people were settling into first-class seats on a $60,000 trip that I had planned as a tribute to Eleanor's memory. They were ordering drinks and adjusting their seats and congratulating themselves probably on how smoothly everything had gone. They had no idea that the ground beneath everything they had planned had already been pulled away. Not dramatically, not loudly. The way a foundation shifts quietly deep down, where no one is looking until the morning you wake up and the structure above it no longer stands. I walked back to my car. I had one more task before noon. I opened the app for my Platinum card and scrolled to the active account linked to the Royal Alps Resort in St. Moritz. The charges were already accumulating a pre-authorization hold of $8,400 for the suite deposit, a spa booking for $1,200, and a restaurant reservation flagged for $340. All on my card. All approved. I did not cancel the card yet. I needed them to arrive first. I needed them to check in to settle into the suite to order the first round of drinks and believe that everything was exactly as they expected. I needed the card to work just long enough for them to stop thinking about it. Then I would make one call, and the card would stop working entirely. I gave them 6 hours, not out of sentiment, out of strategy. A traveler who has just landed after a transatlantic flight needs time to clear customs, collect luggage, transfer to the resort, check in, unpack, and begin to feel settled before they stop paying close attention to their surroundings. 6 hours from wheels up at Logan accounting for flight time. The time difference between Boston and St. Moritz ground transfer from Zurich put them somewhere between the check-in desk and their first dinner reservation. Comfortable, distracted, convinced that everything was working exactly as planned. That was when I wanted to make the call. I drove back to the South End townhouse at noon, made coffee, and sat at Eleanor's desk. I had spent the morning in motion, the Bellevue property, the bank, the sidewalk on Boylston Street with harbor wind in my face. Now I went still. I reviewed my notebook. I verified the sequence of what had been done and what remained. The trust revocation was recorded. The purchase and sale agreement was signed. The wire transfer was processing. The surveillance was running. What remained was the card. At 2:15 in the afternoon, 8:15 in St. Moritz, which put them well into the dinner hour at the resort, I opened my laptop and logged into my Platinum card account. The charges had grown since morning. The pre-authorization hold of $8,400 for the suite was still pending. The spa booking at $1,200 had been confirmed and charged. The restaurant reservation had been updated. The $340 estimate had become $612, which meant they had ordered beyond the initial reservation parameters. And there was a new line item that I had not seen this morning: Royal Alps Bar and Lounge pending authorization, $3,000. $3,000 at the resort bar. Bradley Sterling's work, almost certainly. The man had run up an ambitious tab in the back bay the night before his international flight, a detail Sanchez had noted without commentary, and which I had filed away as characteristic. I picked up my phone. I called the Platinum Card's primary cardholder services line, not the general customer number, but the direct line for account holders at my tier, the one staffed 24 hours, and answered by people who did not put you on hold. The call connected in under a minute. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vance." The representative's voice was professional and unhurried. "How can I assist you today?" "I need to make 2 changes to my account," I said. "First, I want to remove all authorized users from the account effective immediately." A brief pause as she pulled up the account. "I'm showing 2 authorized users currently on the account, Chloe Vance Sterling and Bradley R. Sterling. You'd like both removed." "Both," I said. "Effective immediately." "Understood. I'll process that now." Removing authorized users will cancel their physical cards and terminate their charging privileges as of this moment. Any pending authorizations they've initiated will be blocked. Another brief pause. "Done. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I want to place a block on all new charges from a specific merchant, Royal Alps Resort, St. Moritz, Switzerland, effective immediately." There was a slightly longer pause this time. "Mr. Vance, I want to make sure I understand you have existing charges from this merchant, including a pending suite deposit of $8,400. Would you like to dispute those existing charges as well, or block new charges only?" "Block new charges only," I said. "The existing charges stay. I want to ensure that no further charges from that property are authorized on this account going forward." "Understood. I'll add Royal Alps Resort to your blocked merchant list. Any new authorization request from that property will be automatically declined." She paused. "May I ask, is there anything else I can help you with today?" "One more thing," I said. "I'd like to lower my available credit limit to $500 effective immediately." A beat of silence. This one had a different quality, the brief recalibration of a professional who has encountered an unusual request and is processing it without reaction. "I can do that, Mr. Vance. I'll note the change is at the primary cardholder's request. Your available credit will be reduced to $500 across the account. This will affect any pending authorizations that exceed the new limit." "That's the intention," I said. "Understood. Changes are processed. Is there anything else I can do for you today?" "No," I said. "That'll be all. Thank you." I ended the call and set the phone on the desk. Then I called Royal Alps Resort directly. The international line connected to their guest services desk in under a minute. The representative spoke with the particular precision of Swiss hospitality, formal without coldness, efficient without haste. "Royal Alps Resort, good evening. How may I assist you?" "Good evening," I said. "My name is Robert Vance. I'm the primary cardholder on the account associated with the Sterling Party Suite reservation check-in today, December 16th. "One moment, Mr. Vance." The sound of a keyboard. "Yes, I have the reservation. A suite booking under Sterling Vance, 5 guests. Checked in this evening at 7:42. I'm calling to inform you that the Platinum Card on file for that reservation has been removed from the account effective immediately. The card will no longer authorize any charges for that suite or any services associated with that party's stay." A brief pause. Careful professional. "Mr. Vance, I want to confirm you are the primary cardholder, and you are requesting that we remove the payment method currently on file for the Sterling Party's account." "That is correct." "I understand. In that case, our policy requires that we notify the guests that the current payment method is no longer valid and request an alternative payment method or a cash deposit to cover any outstanding and future charges." Another pause. "I should let you know that the account currently has a pending bar authorization of $3,000 that was initiated approximately 40 minutes ago." That authorization will be declined under the new account status. I understand, I said. That's accurate. Very well, Mr. Vance. I'll note the account accordingly, and our front desk will contact the guests to arrange alternative payment. Is there anything else I can assist you with? No, I said. Thank you. Have a good evening. I closed the laptop. The study was quiet around me. The desk lamp cast a small, warm circle on the surface of Eleanor's desk. The worn center, the ring from 1,000 coffee cups, the faint ghost of pencil marks from decades of letters and lists and calculations. Outside, the December dark had settled in fully, and the street below the window was empty except for a single set of tire tracks in the thin layer of snow that had come down while I was on the phone. I thought about the moment somewhere in the Swiss Alps, in a suite that cost more per night than most people spend on a month's rent, when the front desk would knock on the door, or when Bradley would hand his card to the bartender and watch the transaction process for a long moment before the bartender looked up with the particular expression that means the card has been declined. I did not smile. There was nothing satisfying about it exactly, or rather, the satisfaction was not the point. The point was the sequence. Each step removing one more layer of the assumption they had been operating under, that the trip was secured, that the money was in place, that Robert Vance was a confused old man sitting alone in Boston while they celebrated. The assumption was not secured, the money was not in place, and Robert Vance was not confused. My phone lit up on the desk. A message from Sanchez sent 3 minutes ago with 2 photographs attached. The first photograph showed the lobby of a large alpine resort, high ceilings, stone floors, the warm light of a fire visible at the edge of the frame. In the foreground, slightly blurred, but recognizable, Chloe in a cream-colored coat, a champagne flute in her hand, laughing at something Julian had said. Behind them, Arthur Sterling stood with his phone to his ear, his posture the careful uprightness of a man who wanted to appear relaxed, but was not. The second photograph showed the resort's exterior, the name Royal Alps, visible on a carved stone sign above the entrance, snow on the surrounding peaks, the clean geometry of a building designed to look inevitable against its landscape. I looked at both photographs for a moment. Then I typed back, confirmed. Shift to phase 2. I'll send new instructions in the morning. I set the phone face down. I turned off the desk lamp. Tomorrow I would be at Logan Airport. Not to leave, not yet, but to watch. I did not sleep well. Not because of anxiety, I had told myself that and I believed it. But somewhere around 2 in the morning, I stopped trying to make the distinction and simply lay in the dark with my eyes open, listening to the house. The South End townhouse has its own language at night. The radiators knock and settle. The old oak floors contract in the cold. The window frames in the study shift slightly when the wind changes direction, a sound so familiar that for 30 years I had slept straight through it without registering it consciously, and now without Eleanor beside me, I heard every one. I thought about what I had done in the past 36 hours. The trust revoked and recorded. The house under contract. The joint account empty. The card cut. 4 moves, each one clean, each one legal, each one irrevocable. The kind of work you do when you have thought it through carefully and you are not going to think about it again. But thinking about the work and thinking about what the work meant were 2 different things, and at 2 in the morning, the second kind of thinking arrives, whether you invite it or not. I had a daughter. I had had a daughter. I needed to be precise about the tense, because the person who had called me at 6 o'clock yesterday morning and told me in a voice as flat as a legal document that I was not welcome on a trip I had paid for with 40 years of work, that person had chosen with full deliberation to stop being my daughter somewhere before that phone call. The call had not been the beginning. The call had been the moment I was allowed to see what had already happened. I got up at 4:30 and went to the kitchen. I made coffee the way Eleanor had taught me, not the way I would have made it myself, which was fast and functional, But her way, the good beans ground fresh, the water, just below boiling, the pour slow and even. She had said the patience was part of the flavor. I had humored her for years, and eventually discovered she was right. I sat at the kitchen table with the coffee and did not look at her chair. At 6:15, my phone buzzed. Sanchez Resort reached out to Chloe at 9:47 p.m. local time regarding payment. Chloe placed 3 calls in the following 8 minutes. First call, Julian, 4 minutes. Second call, unidentified number, 1 minute. Third call, Arthur Sterling, 2 minutes. No outbound calls after 10:05 p.m. Room service ordered at 10:30 p.m. All quiet since. I read the message twice, then set the phone face down on the table. 3 calls in 8 minutes. I could reconstruct the conversations without being in the room. The first call to Julian would have been disbelief. The card was declined. Something must be wrong. Call the bank, fix it. The second call, 1 minute, would have been to the bank's customer service line, long enough to hear that the authorized user status had been terminated and the call had been initiated by the primary cardholder. The third call to Arthur Sterling, 2 minutes, that one would have been different in tone. Arthur would have understood immediately what it meant. 2 minutes was just long enough to tell someone that the ground has shifted and you need to think before you move. Then room service at 10:30. Because even in a crisis, people need to eat. And because there was nothing else to do from a Swiss resort at 10 o'clock at night except wait for morning. I finished my coffee and went upstairs to get dressed. By 7:15, I was in my car moving through the quiet streets of the South End toward the Fenway, then out along the Jamaica Way toward Chestnut Hill. I told myself I was driving to Bellevue to check on the property before Rossi's crew arrived. That was true. But the route I took went past Chloe's house on Briarwood Lane, and I did not take a different road. I slowed as I passed it. The house was dark. Julian's BMW was gone, still in the long-term parking at Logan, presumably. The front curtains were drawn. The wreath on the door was the same one Chloe had put up 2 weeks ago, a large pine and ribbon arrangement that had cost, I happen to know, $240 from a florist in Brookline. She had sent me a photograph of it with a caption that said, "Doesn't it look festive, Dad?" I had responded that it looked beautiful. That had been 12 days ago. I kept driving. The Bellevue property was 4 minutes further. I turned onto the street at 7:22 and pulled to the curb across from the house. Victor Rossi's crew had arrived before me. There were 2 pickup trucks parked in the driveway and a flatbed trailer at the curb loaded with equipment I recognized immediately: reciprocating saws, demolition sledges, pry bars, a compressor. 4 men in work gear stood on the front walk drinking coffee from paper cups, their breath visible in the cold morning air. A 5th man, taller than the others, was reviewing something on a tablet near the front door. Rossi himself was not there. He sent crews the way he bought properties, efficiently, without ceremony. I sat in the car and watched the 5 men finish their coffee. The house looked the way it always looked in early morning winter light, solid, well-proportioned. The roofline exactly the pitch I had argued for in 1984. The white oak in the front yard had lost all its leaves by November, the same as every year, and stood bare and precise against the pale sky. Eleanor had planted a climbing rose along the left side of the porch railing. In 2001 it was dormant now, brown canes tied back against the wood. But come May it would have put out the same deep red blooms. It had put out every spring for 24 years, whether anyone was there to see them or not. That thought landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there. I had built this house. I had framed every wall set, every beam, mixed the mortar for the front walk on a hot July morning, with my shirt off and the radio playing from a truck window. Eleanor had brought me lunch in a paper bag every day for 8 months. Egg salad on Mondays, turkey on Wednesdays, something different on Fridays as a small surprise. I could still tell you what the subfloor smelled like in August: fresh-cut lumber and dry heat, the smell of a structure becoming itself. One of the men on the front walk tossed his coffee cup into a trash bag and reached for a pry bar. I started the engine. There was nothing more to see here. The house would come down, and it would come down, because I had decided it would not, because anyone had taken it from me, but because I had moved it out of reach before they could. The distinction mattered. It was the difference between losing something and choosing what to do with it. My phone buzzed as I pulled away from the curb. Sanchez. Arthur Sterling made 2 calls this morning. 10 a.m. 1 to Hartwell, Hartford. 4 minutes. 1 to unknown number, 7 minutes. Chloe has not left the suite. Julian went to the front desk at 7:15 a.m. local. Julian at the front desk, trying to resolve the payment situation with whatever credit cards they had between them, personal cards not tied to my account, not subject to anything I had done. They would figure out a temporary solution, most likely. They would not starve in Switzerland, but they would spend the next 10 days knowing that the ground they had assumed was solid was not. I turned onto the Jamaica Way and headed back toward the south end. Behind me, I heard it faint a block away, carried on the still winter air. The first strike of a sledgehammer against drywall. I did not return to Bellevue that morning. Rossi's crew knew their work. You do not stand over skilled tradesmen and watch you let them work. Instead, I drove back to the south end, made a second pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open and the radio turned low. The kind of morning that would have looked from the outside like a retired man taking it easy. At 9:47, Garrett Rossi's site foreman, a man who communicated exclusively in short sentences and photographs, sent the first update. The photograph showed Bellevue's front hallway. The crown molding I had milled from salvaged white oak cut and fitted over 3 weekends in the fall of 1989 had been removed in sections and stacked along the left wall. Neat work. Behind it, bare plaster and exposed 2x6 studs 16 inches on center over-engineered by a full inch of lumber width, because I had wanted the house to last 100 years. They still looked sound. I set the phone down and finished my coffee. The second photograph arrived at 11:15. The kitchen. The east-facing window was still intact, winter light still entering at its low angle, the same angle it had held for 41 years. But the cabinets were gone. The upper units Eleanor had chosen from a catalog in 1991, the lower units I had built from maple because she wanted something that would last, all stacked in the center of the room, doors hinged open at odd angles, stripped of purpose. The countertop removed, sink fixtures capped. The room looked unmade rather than destroyed, reduced to walls, floor, and a window that still caught the light. I looked at that photograph longer than I intended. Then my phone rang. A +41 number, Switzerland. I watched it ring 4 full cycles without answering. Reacting was not part of the sequence. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. Dad, please call me back. Something happened with the card. It has to be a mistake. I set the phone face down on the table. At 12:30, Sanchez called. Chloe had contacted Francis Doyle, a Boston elder law attorney specializing in emergency injunctive relief, for 9 minutes that morning. She may be pursuing a TRO on the Bellevue sale, Sanchez said. The third photograph arrived at 2 o'clock. The master bedroom. Eleanor's built-in reading alcove, the one I had framed as a surprise, the one she had stood before in silence for a full minute, was gone. Only its rectangular outline remained pressed into the surrounding drywall. I recognized the shape the way you recognize a face. At 4:55, Garrett reported ground floor demolition complete. Attached a photograph of Bellevue with a red and white sold sign planted slightly off-center in the frozen front yard. From the street, the house looked untouched. At 5:15, Sanchez marked a message, urgent resort incident, St. Moritz, sending details now. Sanchez sent 7 messages in 4 minutes. I read them in sequence the way you read a damage report after a storm, methodically from the beginning. The first, Bradley Sterling attempted to order a bottle of Domaine de la Romanée Conti, 2015, vintage priced at $4,800. His personal visa ending in 4471 was declined. The second, he presented 2 additional cards. Both declined. The third, Bradley became verbally disruptive, using language the dining room manager described as inappropriate. 3 adjacent tables requested relocation. The fourth resort security approached at 11:05 p.m. Julian intervened and de-escalated. Bradley was escorted to the suite. The fifth, Arthur Sterling, settled the $1,340 dining bill with his personal American Express and established it as the primary payment method for the suite. The sixth, Chloe left the dining room during the incident, stood in the lobby for 12 minutes, and made one 4-minute call to an unidentified number. The seventh, she will call you within the hour. I set the phone down and sat back. There was no satisfaction in it, I reminded myself. Then I reminded myself I had already said that once today, which suggested it might not be entirely true. My phone rang at 6:47. I answered on the first ring. Chloe. 2 seconds of silence. Not empty silence, the silence of someone whose preparation had failed at the sound of my voice. Dad. Her voice was smaller than I had heard in years. The card stopped working. The bank said the authorized user status was terminated by the primary cardholder. Yes, I said. That's me. Why would you do this? We're in Switzerland. Bradley had an incident because he attempted to order a $4,800 bottle of wine on cards that could not cover it. That is not a problem I created. She went quiet. I know about the guardianship petition, I said. I know about Dr. Pendleton, the billing records Gerald Hartwell, and the January 6th filing date. I know about the $29,700, all 3 withdrawals, the specific amounts, the specific dates, and exactly why those amounts were chosen. The line was silent. The Bellevue house closes December 19th. The trust is revoked and recorded. The joint account is transferred. Everything was done legally correctly and by me while in full possession of my faculties, documented in a sworn declaration filed with Suffolk County Probate Court. Her breathing was uneven. Enjoy the rest of the trip, Chloe. You paid for it. I ended the call. My hands were completely still. Later, I opened Mitchell's email. Attached a 43-page medical board filing billing records, session, transcripts, 17 text messages between Chloe and Pendleton spanning 8 months. At the top, Mitchell had written, filing ready. Recommend submission tomorrow, 8 a.m. Call me at 7. I set an alarm for 6:45. My alarm went off at 6:45. 3 hours of sleep. I was dressed and at the kitchen table with coffee by 7, the Pendleton filing package on screen. I read all 43 pages, every word. It took an hour and 12 minutes. The billing records' first 8 months of invoices from Pendleton Behavioral Health, each formatted as a geriatric cognitive assessment, each billed to an insurance account. In my name I had never authorized. The dates matched exactly the days Chloe had called suggesting coffee and errand, a quick check-in with a specialist she'd heard good things about. The session transcripts next. Clinical language precise and authoritative on the surface. But reading them carefully, the way you read a contract for the meaning behind the words, the distortions were clear. Normal grief responses documented as cognitive decline. A notation claiming I had difficulty recalling financial details during a session where by Pendleton's own transcript, I had accurately described a construction contract from 14 months prior. The transcripts had been written to reach a conclusion that was decided before the first session began. The third section, 17 text messages between Chloe and Pendleton, April through November. The early ones were logistical. By the 6th, the language had changed. Chloe, he mentioned the Bellevue property document that has confusion about asset ownership. Pendleton understood. I'll frame the notation accordingly. I set the laptop down after that one. I called Mitchell at 7:15. The sixth message, I said, that is conspiracy to commit fraud on a court. I forwarded the package to Agent Sarah Jenkins, FBI Boston last night, Mitchell said. Elder Fraud Unit. She called back at 11:15. The three $9,900 withdrawals had already been flagged through FinCEN 6 weeks ago. The investigation is open. She wants to meet this afternoon. Patricia delivered the medical board filing in person at 8 o'clock. At 2:47, Mitchell's phone rang. Pendleton Behavioral Health, Brookline, Massachusetts. On speaker, Pendleton's voice was careful and rehearsed. He wanted to discuss context. Mitchell stopped him. Clean, the matter had been referred to federal law enforcement. Retain counsel before making further calls. A long silence. Then understood. Mitchell ended the call. He'll cooperate. By tomorrow morning, I said. Sanchez messaged minutes later. Arthur Sterling, 6 calls in 2 hours. Julian left the resort at 2 p.m. local. Car to Zurich. Then Mitchell's laptop chimed. He read the screen and something shifted in his expression. The closest Mitchell Reed ever came to surprise. He turned the laptop toward me. Heinrich Braun. Zurich. Re Sterling Vance matter. Urgent communication. I leaned forward and read the rest. The email from Heinrich Braun was 4 paragraphs long. Mitchell and I read it together, leaning over the laptop on the conference table. Braun was a senior partner at a Zurich firm, International Family Law. His English was precise, the English of someone who had learned it as a professional instrument and used it accordingly. Julian had retained him that afternoon. The email stated that Julian wished to communicate through proper legal channels certain information relevant to the matter involving Robert Arthur Vance, and that he was prepared to provide a full account to any appropriate legal authority, including federal law enforcement. The third paragraph was the one I read twice. My client wishes Mr. Vance to understand that his participation was not entered into freely or with full knowledge of its scope. My client was informed by his father, Arthur Sterling, that Mr. Vance had privately expressed a desire for family involvement in his financial management, and that the arrangements were necessary to protect family assets. My client states he had reason to believe this account was accurate, and did not know until recent days the full nature of the medical evaluation process or the communications now in evidence. I sat back. Arthur Sterling had built a story for his own son the same way he had built everything else carefully, from the inside out, using just enough truth to make the rest hold. The fourth paragraph was brief. Julian was prepared to sign the attached document as a gesture of good faith. Mitchell opened the attachment. A Massachusetts complaint for divorce. Petitioner Julian Andrew Sterling. Respondent Chloe Marie Vance Sterling. Julian's signature already on it, executed before a Swiss notary at 1:47 p.m. Zurich time. Forward it to Jenkins tonight, I said. Tell Braun I won't stand in the way of Julian's cooperation. Mitchell reached for his phone. While he typed, Sanchez messaged. Arthur confronted Chloe in the suite, 8:30 p.m. local. 22 minutes. Beatrice left mid-confrontation. Bradley checked out at 6:15 car to Zurich Airport. Chloe hasn't made a call in 3 hours. Room service at 9:45. Bradley gone. Beatrice gone. Arthur cutting losses. Chloe was alone in a suite her father had paid for, with a card that didn't work, and a husband who had spent the afternoon signing divorce papers in another city. How are you doing? Mitchell asked quietly. It was the first time anyone had asked in 3 days. The hardest part of any job isn't the construction, I said. It's the demolition first. Clearing the ground so what comes next has something solid to stand on. He nodded once. That was enough. In the lobby, my phone buzzed. Sanchez Chloe booked a return flight. Logan, December 23rd. Traveling alone. She was coming home. To what exactly she did not yet fully know. The closing took 47 minutes. Mitchell and I arrived at the Boylston Street Title Company at 8:45 on December 19th. Rossi was already there. The wire transfer of $1,760,000 landed in Mitchell's escrow account at 9:12. I signed the deed transfer at 9:22, set the keys on the table between us, and walked out onto Boylston Street at 9:31 with nothing that required immediate action. I stood on the sidewalk in the December cold and breathed. The days between the 19th and Christmas passed in the particular quiet that follows major demolition, not emptiness, but restoration. On the 20th, I drove to Forest Hills Cemetery and stood at Eleanor's grave with white roses coat open against the cold, the way she always insisted I should wear it. I told her what had happened, not as a report, just as a conversation. I told her I was all right. On the 21st dinner with Carl Whitfield, my first foreman 44 years ago, still opinionated about load calculations. He did not ask about Chloe. He knew when not to. On the 23rd, Sanchez messaged at 6:15, Chloe cleared customs at Logan, 5:47 p.m. No one meeting her. Taxi to Chestnut Hill. She was home. I did not call. Neither did she. Christmas morning arrived slowly, gray before gold. I was awake at 5:30, made coffee, watched the street come into definition through the kitchen window. At 8:47, she's at Bellevue. 4 minutes later, a photograph. Chloe on the front walk in a dark coat, keys in hand, facing a door with a lock she couldn't open. The sold sign leaned slightly left in the frozen yard. A second photograph, her hands cupped against the front window, looking in at stripped walls and bare studs. A third, Chloe from the side face, turned toward the street. From the house next door came children's voices, the bright particular chaos of Christmas morning among people who love each other. She stood in the cold and listened. I could not see her face, but I could see her shoulders, and I knew what shoulders look like when a body finally acknowledges what the mind has been refusing. Sanchez. 22 minutes. Not moving. Should I approach? I typed back, no, let her stand there. I held my coffee in both hands and looked out at the South End street, thin snow, a neighbor's wreath, one car moving with no apparent urgency. My phone rang. Chloe. I answered on the second ring. Chloe. For a moment, there was nothing on the line except the sound of December wind moving through bare branches, the distant rhythm of a church bell somewhere in the Chestnut Hill neighborhood, counting out the Christmas morning hour. She was still outside, still standing in front of the house. Dad. Her voice was different from every other time I had heard it this week. Not the flat authority of the 6 o'clock call, not the tightness of the Swiss resort, not the prepared script of someone managing a situation. This was the unmanaged version, the voice underneath all the others, the one that does not know how to be strategic because it is too tired to try. I'm looking at the sign, she said. The sold sign. I know, I said. A long pause, wind on the line. I didn't think you would actually do it, she said. Not accusatory, just honest, the honesty of someone who has finally stopped performing and is left with only what is true. I thought I don't know what I thought. That you wouldn't. That you couldn't. I built that house, I said quietly. I knew every beam in it, every nail. I knew exactly what it could bear and what it couldn't. I paused. The same way I knew what I could bear and what I couldn't. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped lower, rougher at the edges, the way voices get when the throat is tight. Dad, I'm sorry. The words came out unevenly, as though they had been waiting behind something that had just given way. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know what we did. I know what I let them do. I let Arthur convince me that it was that we were protecting you, that you needed. She stopped, drew a breath that was audible and unsteady. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it before I let it get this far, and I let it anyway. I sat with that for a moment, not to make her wait, that was not the point, but because what she had just said was the only true thing she had offered me since this had begun, and it deserved to land somewhere real before I responded to it. Your mother would have seen it, I said finally. She would have seen it before it started. She had that she could look at a room full of people and know in 30 seconds who was performing and who wasn't. She never said it unkindly. She just knew. I paused. She would have sat you down. Before any of this. She would have made you coffee and sat across the table from you and looked at you the way she looked at things she loved that were going wrong, and she would have said, "Chloe, what is it that you actually need?" The line was very quiet. "I don't know," Chloe said. Her voice had gone very small. "I don't know what I needed. I don't think I knew then either." "I know," I said. And I meant it not as absolution, not as an erasure of what had been done, but as the simple truth that I had spent 40 years watching people make decisions from places they didn't fully understand, and that understanding the origin of a decision does not change its consequences. It only changes how you carry the grief of it. "There's something you need to know," I said. "Mitchell Reed will be reaching out to you in the next few days. There is a federal investigation open Elder Fraud Unit, FBI, Boston. The structured withdrawals from your mother's emergency account, flagged through FinCEN 6 weeks ago. The medical board complaint against Pendleton was filed on the 18th. Dr. Pendleton has already indicated he will cooperate with federal authorities." I kept my voice level. "A subpoena will be served after the holiday. Your name is on it. So is Arthur Sterling's." She did not respond immediately. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you," I said. "I'm telling you because you are still my daughter, and you deserve to hear it from me rather than from a federal agent at your door." I paused. "Get a lawyer, Chloe. A good one, not Hartwell. Someone who will tell you the truth about where you stand and what your options are." "Julian," she started. "Julian has his own attorney," I said. "What Julian decides is between him and his legal counsel. You need to focus on yourself now." Another silence. Longer this time. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked finally. The question was quiet and direct, and I believed for the first time in a long time that she actually wanted to know the answer. I looked around the kitchen of the South End townhouse. The coffee cup on the table. Eleanor's coat rack in the hall, the ginkgo leaf hooks catching the pale Christmas light. The window above the sink, the same window I had looked out of at 6 in the morning, 10 days ago when the phone had rung and started all of this. "Yes," I said, "I'm going to be all right. I meant that too." "Dad." Her voice cracked on the single syllable just slightly, just enough. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said. And then, because there was nothing more to say that would not diminish what had already been said, and because the sequence that had begun 10 days ago on a cold Boston morning had arrived at its last necessary point, I said the only thing left. "Goodbye, Chloe." I ended the call. I set the phone face down on the kitchen table and sat very still for a moment. Outside the Christmas morning, street was coming fully awake. A neighbor's door opened across the way, and I could hear the sound of a child's voice, high and excited, carrying through the cold air with the particular brightness that belongs only to Christmas morning, and to children who still believe that brightness is the natural condition of the world. I hoped they were right for as long as possible. I rinsed my coffee cup and walked upstairs to finish packing. My flight left at 4 o'clock. Logan Airport on Christmas afternoon runs quiet. I arrived at Terminal B at 1:45 with one bag. Cleared security in 11 minutes. Found Gate B14, Bridgetown, Barbados, 4:05 p.m. and sat by the window. At 2:15, Sanchez sent the final update. Arthur Sterling contacted by FBI Boston at 10:30 a.m. He made 11 calls before noon. Bradley didn't answer either of the two meant for him. Gerald Hartwell filed to withdraw from the guardianship matter this morning. Effective immediately. I typed back, "Your work is finished. Invoice Mitchell's office." His reply came in 40 seconds, already done. Safe travels. I set the phone face down on the seat. In my jacket pocket, next to my boarding pass, was a page from Eleanor's 1978 travel journal, The Honeymoon Trip the only time we came to Barbados. Her left-handed script covered both sides. At the bottom was a pencil sketch of a flower she'd seen on the path to the water. She hadn't photographed it. Photographs are too exact, she'd said when I asked why. You want to leave room for it to be more than it was. I had not planned to bring the page. Somewhere between the kitchen and the stairs this morning, I had turned around, gone back to her desk, and put it in my pocket without quite deciding to. Some decisions happen below the level of deciding. The gate agent's voice came over the speaker. Flight 447 to Bridgetown now boarding. Merry Christmas and safe travels. I picked up my bag. For the first time in 10 days, I was walking towards something. Wheels up at 412. Boston fell away below the harbor, the grid the common white in the center of it all. Then the clouds closed over the windows, and the city was gone. Above them, the sky was perfectly improbably blue. Sitting on the beach in Barbados, I finally found the quiet I desperately needed. God gives us a clean slate with fresh snow, but in life we must sometimes clear the rot ourselves. Looking back at my own actions, I realized that while I protected my dignity, the cost was the total destruction of my family. Don't be like me. Don't let things get so cold and broken that a controlled demolition is your only option. Left unchecked, deep bitterness will twist love into cold calculation. In life, you build or you destroy. There is no middle ground. These intense family stories, revenge, serve as a brutal reminder of what happens when trust completely fails. I never wanted my life to become one of those tragic family stories, revenge channels, but survival demanded blueprints of steel. If you are caught in a web of betrayal, seek clarity before building a fortress of retaliation. Let this family drama revenge end here on these shores, far away from courtrooms and bitter text messages. May your own choices build bridges, not ruins. This dark family drama revenge taught me that true strength is knowing when to walk away before the structure collapses entirely. Thank you so much for following this journey until the very end. Your support means everything to me. A quick warning before you go. The upcoming family stories, revenge and high-stakes family drama Revenge Chronicles contain some fictionalized elements structured for educational purposes. If this dramatic content isn't right for you, feel free to exit and choose another story that better suits your path.